Hey everybody, it's Dave with No Chaser, and today's topic is, well, kind of a scenario like this. Let's say you're in early recovery, kind of like me. As of today, I am 33 days sober and clean. And you're starting to get out of what I'd call the fog. Um, I let's use a metaphor. I like those. You can think of it as times in active addiction or active alcoholism that in some ways you may be in the eye of the storm. Kind of like in hurricanes, there's that sort of weird thing in tropical storms or, weather that there's this just destruction going on, all the winds and the flying cows. Maybe that's tornadoes, I guess. But anyway, so much destruction going on, and then right in the middle, in the sort of the like where everything is kind of like in this weird. Am I really explaining Eye of the Storm? Don't most people get that? Anyways, in the middle of it, like right dead in the center of it, there's actually kind of this weird area of calm, or I mean, it's the unaffected area, kind of where really like the way storms are, everything is being destroyed around it, and as it passes, like when people are on boats and they're crab fishing or whatever people do out on boats, they go through this incredibly harsh part, and then they're in the eye, and things are just all right, but everybody knows that if you're in the eye of it, you're gonna have to pass through the storm again. Well, anyways, so I imagine a lot of like my active alcoholism and addiction is I was kind of in a place like that, like where the quote unquote calm is, I don't know, being under the influence or just putting your blinders on, being ignorant to what's going on. And a lot of people, they catch themselves in this eye of the storm because bad things haven't happened yet necessarily, or they're like doing all their duties, kind of keeping stuff together. They're going to work, they're taking care of their kids to the best of their abilities, or I know I've heard a lot of people say that I was there but wasn't present, or basically just maybe not terrible stuff is happening. You haven't had those consequences of health or legal or financial or at work or in relationships, but things are crumbling. I to use another analogy in nature, I'm full of those. There's these times where people, if you imagine that you're sawing wood, like a big log from a tree, and, when something occurs in a person's life where they finally get pulled over or they get caught with the drugs or they finally get fired or the person finally leaves them or files for divorce or, the CPS shows up for their kids or all the horrible things that can happen, they imagine that singular moment, that event, that's where things broke. And the truth is, it's like that sawing of the wood where there's so much sawing going on that you're just going through the whole log and then thinking that last moment, that's when bad stuff happened. Where in reality, even though the tree was together, the log or whatever, what have you, that sawing has been happening the whole time. And, with the eye of the storm sort of metaphor, it could be bad stuff could totally be happening around you to where you're just kind of chemically ignorant, again, due to just being drunk or high, where, things can just feel fine, even though they're not, because you're under their influence. That's kind of why you do drugs and alcohol in the first place. And or for me, like many times I've been in this sort of state of just trying to like will myself into this apathy, to act like I don't care. I don't care what happens in my life or my body. One of those things where I'm only hurting myself. You never really are. But to just, and I find out that I do care about my life. Like the moment I actually get close to death in some sort of way, they're like, no, I take it back. I want to live. But that people, like, I bring up that sort of metaphor of the eye of the storm is because a lot of people from the outside looking in can kind of, just look at the person that is just, everything is crumbling around them. Like, how are they just oblivious to this? Or how do they not know what's going on or what they're doing? Or what do they think they're doing? Or do they think they're getting away with it? You'd be amazed how many times that you totally think you're getting away with it, and you're very much not. But then, you know, you're basically sitting there, and everything's getting ruined. People at work are noticing, or your family is noticing. Maybe you're getting into trouble, or maybe the law is noticing. Maybe you're dealing to support your habit, or you're just drinking all the time, and you're isolated, and you've basically just disappeared from people's lives. And so it may not be that bad in the middle of this storm, because that's, the drunk, the high, it kind of allows you to be calm, or it allows you to be okay with just the storm around you. Just like I said, the chaos and the calamity, and let's see, another C word, carnage that is happening. And then, for whatever reason, whatever happens, whatever thing like intervenes in your life, like me, myself, I've actually never had like a formal intervention. I've usually something else intervenes, where police, or a severe health problem, or my mind mentally breaks and you get an old trip to the psych ward with a nice fresh pair of grippy socks. But it's in that, and for me at least, a couple days doesn't do it. I mean, there's like the acute withdrawals where it's just basically, you're under a different type of influence. You're so sick, and sometimes you're totally going crazy, where you have like the DTs with alcohol, where delirium tremens, and believe me, it is delirious. Or you're just going through opiate withdrawals and how horrific those could be, or you're going through meth withdrawals and you sleep for 4 days straight like a dead body. And if you get a little bit further, you're still, me at least, I'm still in that fog. So I may be sober, I may have like mental acuity in this sort of sense, and I think some sort of clarity. Like I said, it's foggy, but I kind of, like, I have my senses together at least, kind of. But there's still, those fish hooks in my brain of addiction, or the addicted mindset too. It takes a little bit more time to really get out of that. And then in that moment, or in that moment rather, but in that sort of clearing up, the brushing away of the fog, getting out of the heavy, dense forest into the clearing. Again, a lot of nature imagery here, but getting out of that, then you realize, it's kind of like coming out of the basement from the tornado, and then all those sounds and all those crashes you kind of heard from a distance, and you just kind of wanted to, see no evil, hear no evil with yourself. And then you start to realize what you've done, and more importantly, how you've been. And that's kind of the thing I wanted to key on, is that, the how you've been thinking, what your mind has actually been like. And it doesn't even take too much, it's crazy. Even 3 weeks later, even 2 weeks later, maybe, you could just look back, you're like, I can't believe I was thinking that way. Like, you can come to an understanding of the things you did, or the singular sort of events of what happened, of like getting arrested, or some fight you got into, or some dumb stuff you did when you were drunk, or nasty things you said, or, I remember one time, I'm not too proud of this. I remember I was just fiending for alcohol, and I was trying to leave, and my significant other at the time knew I was going out for alcohol. She's like, you can't do this. And I was like, I have to, I can't not do it. And she's just like, that's just the alcohol talking, or that's the addiction talking. Like when you hear that phrase, that's just the drugs talking. And in my brain, I thought, yeah, no shit. Like, my brain is completely hijacked, and I can't stop this thing. And so, stepping away for a little bit, you can see all that, but where the real shocking thing is that just the way your mind, what kind of mindset you have. And that's one thing I've talked about before, and I'll talk about more, is the idea of not just being addicted to a substance, but being addicted to a mindset, being addicted to a way of thinking, or a way of being. And you step away from it, and you may still be having cravings, or you may still be thinking about doing drugs or drinking, and it still could be on your mind. But with a good amount of clarity, clearing up some of the fog, you see that you see how much your mind was hijacked. Like, because it's not just a sense of like, the obsession and compulsion that comes with addiction. It's also, I believe, very much this sort of way that your mind is warped. Like, this is how you like come to do things that are totally against your morals. This is like this sort of the grind in the game that you play to just in the pursuit of drugs and alcohol, in the pursuit of the next drunk, the next high. It's this mindset that you might not even be aware that you've adopted. And I mean, that's what I feel is one of the craziest things is when I relapse is that it's not just going back. Now I'm totally, sucked in and obsessing over it and craving over it. But I truly feel like when I take a drink or pop a pill, one brain is being pulled out and another one's being put back in. And it's almost like there's a different lens to the way I see everything. Everything's grayer and just the world looks differently, and just what my actions and mindset is about what I'm doing just becomes completely self-centered and completely nihilistic, just, it's devil may care sort of attitude. And I step back and I look at that, I'm just like, man, that is just, a lot of people, it's one thing if you see like a video of yourself when you're super hammered and you're like, and you're not just like sleeping, as a friend's drawing a penis on your face with permanent marker, but you're straight up, you see yourself talking like in the blackout, just maybe not acting, maybe a slur to your words, but you see yourself, and it's crazy to watch yourself if you're in like some heated argument with somebody where you're totally in the wrong, or you're saying these nasty things, or you're just being very stupid. And it's one thing to see that, and you're like, well, that's the chemicals and the intoxication that has taken over. But it's another thing to step back and kind of see yourself, not just in some video that your girlfriend or boyfriend took, but to see yourself as for what you were doing and how you were thinking. How that, again, it's a way of exploring how, morals and your values sort of change or just go out the window. It doesn't happen, I think a lot of things what people don't maybe understand, or they maybe know but don't know in a way, is that living as an alcoholic and addict, there's not these sort of clear binary choices where, when you say someone chose drugs over their kids, it's not like there's door number one that's drugs and door number two is kids. You don't get kids in the other door, and then if you pull the lever to open up the drug door, your kids fall into a hole. Sorry, that's weird. But you get what I'm saying. It's not just I am just clearly choosing this over this. You're not, when you choose drugs and alcohol over things, it's not an actual choice that you're making, because what at least I was trying to do so much is just get away with it. I was trying sort of like this Venn diagram with the two circles that actually won't Venn or whatever you want. They won't merge. I'm just trying to squish life and drugs and alcohol together to make them so they can both coexist, and it doesn't work that way for me. And in that attempt to do that, that's where you start making these sort of moral compromises. But sometimes, as I've been in some stages before, you just get into a state of mind where you are comfortable in a way with just living like you don't care about your future, living like you don't care about others, living in this sort of survival mode, which is a thing that your brain is being, when I talk about your brain getting hijacked, that's another part of it. Like your mid-brain, the survival part of your brain, that is being hijacked too, to where it sees drugs and alcohol as a mechanism for survival. It starts to see it like food and water. And so you start living as if, and then as you step back from, and you look at the destruction and everything that's occurred, it's quite a sight to behold. And the even crazier part, one thing to touch on too, is that you realize the insanity and the madness that you've been living in. And if you've been through this a few times like I have, the recovery and the addiction and the relapse and the failure and then the success and then failure, if you live through that, you realize that you've been living in an insane way. And the more insane thing is that it won't take much for you to go back to that completely. I mean, it won't, it takes but a drink, but a drug, shooting up once, snorting the line once, just one shot, one opportunity to, okay, we're not doing 8 Mile, but no, one shot intravenously, one line, one pill, just to go back. Then your mind is in that, and then you're back into the eye of the storm, where you're in this sort of familiar, comfortable misery, where it's calm-ish. It gets less and less calm the more you do it. The relapses get worse, and the enjoyment you get from the drugs and alcohol get less and less. But the destruction, again, that occurs around you, and now you're talking about not just getting in trouble, but getting felonies. Now you're talking about like actually losing your kids, becoming homeless, or just family finally giving up on you, being completely friendless, and you just stay in that eye of the storm, and you just try. At least what I do is I just try to deny what's happening around me, or pretending that I don't care what's happening around me, and then it just takes just even the tiniest bit of clarity to be like, dude, this is insane. I can't live like this anymore. So anyways, I won't blabber about a lot of this stuff. You can go to the description to check out a link to a podcast I do with another interesting fellow of mine. A book I have where you can get it on Amazon or for free. There's instructions for that too. Other than that, thanks for watching and be well.